Hi, I'm Brett Cenkus, a business attorney with a specialization in mergers and acquisitions and an M&A advisor. We do that under the umbrella Brayton Woods. And today we are talking about AI and its impact on law. Specifically, we'll spend some time on particularly on M&A. Quickly, before we get going, if you want to book a paid call with me, you can do that. You can generally get me the same day, sometimes within a few hours. It's a very good system, a third-party system. It's clarity.fm/Brett Cenkus. That is absolutely the quickest way to talk to me about your specific situation. If you have general questions, put them down in the comments, and we're doing better about responding to those comments and keeping up on them than I did for a little bit there. So we'll certainly feel free to use that, but paid calls at Clarity. Spoiler alert. AI is changing things. The ground is shifting. It's having an impact, a very significant impact in our world. And backing up, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been involved in M&A, in law, and on the finance and entrepreneurial sort of side of things, but like around M&A as a core function of what I do for almost 3 decades. And I've seen a lot of things touted as game changers. Like, this is going to affect everything. You won't have a job soon. And that's, there were originally like templates, like there were books that sold these fill in the blank templates, which became eventually like a legal Zoom. And the idea was people won't need lawyers. And then legal offshoring was a big one. It's the business will all go to offshore lawyers who work in low cost countries and, can do what you do. And then there's the whole sort of smarter products like Carta for cap table management and things like that. That would just be a specific function that a lawyer handles and just a function of a certain type of lawyer. So that's not exactly going to replace a whole lawyer, but the idea that this will take over and there's no more need for you to spend any time and bill for this sort of thing. I've seen all this, lots and lots of different stuff. None of it's been particularly game changing. I've tried so many products over the years. There used to be one called Deal Proof that I used when I was at a big law firm, and I liked it. It was kind of like Word for lawyers, and it would spot when you defined a term and didn't use it, or didn't define a term. But I was the only corporate lawyer using it. I mean, at that firm that I'm sure of that, and that was a big firm because it just was so one-dimensional, and all these products are, I guess. So, and they've had some little impact, okay, a little bit, but it's really been very low-level stuff, like. And clients who just don't have budget to really pay lawyers. That's really what all this stuff, and the Deal Proof was for lawyers, but the point of all of it being none of it's particularly changed the profession, let's say. Technology generally has sped everything up. When I first started in law, we used to overnight packages. I mean, we had 8 people, I think, working in that, I forget now, but in the overnight shipping department at this law firm. It was a big law firm, but the office itself had maybe 100 lawyers. And we were setting up packages every night, shipping these like hand copies, right? That's how they were going out of M&A agreements. Obviously, email, everything's so much more productive. But fundamentally, like changing and replacing lawyers, it just hasn't happened. And today, we're not at the robots are eating the lawyer stage today either. However, AI is significantly different than everything else I've seen. It's different in the impact it's already having. It is very common now for a client to come to us and say, I ChatGPT'd this, or here's something that they did. Can you take a look at it? It's very common. And I talked to a client the other day that we do stuff for, and he said, I'm leveraging it a lot for legal. And I go to and ask questions. And he was telling me about a question that I know he would have called me on previously. I'm sure of it. Now he's a smart guy, does research and does his own research. And the stuff he's getting, he can find, I'm going to talk about that in a second, could find with Google, without AI. But I think I said before, these other products are so one-dimensional. AI's ability to understand what you're after and find it and then build on it for you and who you are is really unique and much, much more powerful and multidimensional than all these other tools in many ways. And I'll get to specifics. So anyway, it is very easy for me to see that quite a bit of what I do will be gone. At least, and so when I talk about LegalZoom and all that stuff, that's for people who didn't really have any budget. I feel like these are clients who have budget, but they're just realizing this is way more efficient. I hope they're not thinking it's better than Brett. I doubt they're thinking that, or they wouldn't be my client. But it is way more efficient. Quicker and less costly to just hop in there. And then they'll usually come and say, this is what I got. What do you think? And giving us a document that ChatGPT, well, let me talk about that for a second. ChatGPT can create contracts, and we are leveraging it to do that. Now, everything we do starts with a form, and we got thousands of forms, and finding the right place to start is a lot of the key. For ChatGPT is really efficient for changing those contracts quickly or issue spotting those contracts in efficient ways. So you can send ChatGPT a contract. I can do this, or a layperson can do it. Obviously, my end product is probably going to be better when I know what it ought to look like in the end. But just some business owner who knows LegalZoom is just basic template and that doesn't reflect their particular deal can more easily, now have more confidence, it would appear. I mean, I'm seeing our clients admit, we did this on ChatGPT, when they're our client. But when the stakes are lower, right, and they want to save money, everyone wants to save money, they're doing this. And so they could go in there and they could say, I need, right, I need an independent contractor agreement, and I need it to favor the company. And the independent contractor is in Illinois and the company is in Delaware. You can tell ChatGPT the things that are on your mind. And the business people are already spotting that stuff. They don't spot everything that we spot all the time usually, but they come to us usually with some unique needs. And that's why we have an intake and talk about it. And in LegalZoom, you can't solve for that. And they don't know how to go find that in the world. And so, but ChatGPT can do it, and it can do a pretty good job. And look, it's not easy. I mean, I can't use it entirely, but we can leverage it. And we're already saying, give me a paragraph that talks about this rather than going to try to find it. And look, we never start with blank page. Creativity is not part of being a corporate lawyer. Smoke would come out of my ears if I looked at a blank page at this stage. So you find this stuff in other places, but sometimes the provision, I've got to go find SEC filed public documents that have that provision in there, and then I can morph them together and write them. And I can tell ChatGPT, go get this for me, write it like this. And if I've already given it contracts that in my style, which I have, it'll reflect that. It can reflect that a little bit. I'm sure it could get better than I'm doing on that. And it can also conform the terms, the defined term. It is way more efficient in certain ways. But it's still not at the point where we would just hand it, write the whole contract. It just doesn't work very well. We've tried it. Yeah, we've tried it. It takes hours and it's a lot of work. I mean, I do think, but here's the thing. Clients are coming to us regularly. Maybe not half the clients have asked me about it, but a lot, right? And so they're more informed. They're getting a head start. They're creating some basic documents. And again, us taking that over may or may not be efficient. I want to work with clients any way I want. As long as we get paid when we work, I just don't care what I work on. If we all understand what it is I'm supposed to be doing, what you bought, it doesn't matter to me. It's just sometimes when they come with something half-baked, it's it just doesn't work for us to take it over, especially if it was just something they put together on their own. It's it just might require too much to get the product that we're willing to, show and knowing what we know just can be hard to do that. But anyway, so much they're coming to us, and ChatGPT is going to get better at what it does. And there's no question, at lightning speed. So we're already seeing this impact, and it's not hard to think in a year or two, it's going to be way more significant. Those other technologies I talked about had no ability to do any of that. Now, and there are other smart, there's AI and then there's other smart tools. I mentioned, I think Carta earlier. There are limits. So we're not at the stage of the robots eating lawyers, because what's happening is the lower level stuff is going away. And now we're going to see not just pieces of lower level jobs going away, but wholesale. Some lawyers are just going to lose business, I think, because they're just fundamentally not adding a tremendous amount of value. We had a client come to us for a dispute recently, and we got into their company operating agreement. And we're going to hand this off. We're trying to handle it outside of litigation. We're handing this off to a litigator, and I'm handing it off. And we're on a call with the client and the litigator and us. And the litigator, who we sent a lot of business to, says, who drafted this operating agreement? And I know he's trying to be tactful because he didn't know maybe we did it, but he didn't think we did it because it was a pile of garbage. It really just was. And I said, nah, it's not ours. And basically by, at the end of the call, we really try and have professional courtesy, and there's not much to be gained for throwing people under the bus, but it's just hard to work with this and not say, this thing is not good. And ChatGPT could beat that today. It's just no question. It's just because that lawyer was mailing it in. I don't know. Maybe that lawyer who I think did it didn't do it. Maybe the client didn't go back and finish the project. I don't know what happened, but it's garbage. It's just got conflicts everywhere. It's confusing. It's got error. It's just not good work, and better is out there. And if that's how someone's approaching their profession, and there are those lawyers, they don't care about getting better at their job. They're not trying to be better. They're not thinking about the value that they deliver. They're just going through the motions. And I'm sure that's the case. There's people like that in every profession everywhere. There's just no question, right? In every society, like those low-level professional jobs will get swept up pretty quickly. Not because by the clients who have no budget, right? That's that LegalZoom stuff, and we weren't getting the business anyway. I think it's because pretty quickly the clients who are engaging those types of lawyers I'm describing will realize, I mean, look, the reality is they don't necessarily have that much perspective themselves as business owners if they're in that relationship with someone who's mailing it in. But sometimes there's something understood or implicit that my lawyer's not the best lawyer. Like I could upgrade this relationship probably. And I think they're going to realize they can upgrade through ChatGPT pretty quickly. And heck, maybe my client thought that about the research thing he told me about. I don't know. I mean, it's possible. But I do know I spend a lot of time trying to be a better lawyer, reading about my profession, asking questions, being curious, thinking about the value I deliver and the customer experience and all that sort of stuff. But look, I'm not perfect. So that's what's going on out there. And it's not just my firm who's looking at using ChatGPT. Like every professional should be looking about, well, how's this going to impact their world? And most of that, a lot of them are. The last statistic I read is that 53% of the AmLaw 200, the top 200 law firms in the country, I think by revenue, not headcount, are 53% of them have acquired AI products, and something like 45% are using them. Well, it's shocking that it's not 99%, frankly, but still, that's getting the AmLaw 200, which, by the way, like they've got lots of lawyers who are in their latter years who aren't buying it, and it's just not interested in adopting new technology. And I'm not going to say that's every older lawyer, but you can imagine plenty of them who are like, nah, that's not how we do things around here, and that just happens. That's why businesses like newspapers just keep doing what they do until they're gone. It's like there's no, and it's hard to steer giant ships. And if they got the massive law firms getting everyone on the same page for how you're going to use these things and what they're going to mean, it's very difficult. It's much easier to be status quo and do nothing. So I guess I shouldn't be shocked, but 53% of them are using it. So the M&A space more specifically, and staying with, sort of the big law, big business kind of concept, Goldman Sachs has said that they're leveraging AI significantly, including in investment banking, to do deep related research. And if they're out there publicly saying it, right, versus realizing, hey, this is pretty good, better than what we're sort of doing on our own, it's just another indication of the confidence the world has. And I have a lot of confidence in who Goldman Sachs is. Not that everyone over there is the smartest person in the room, but they are bright people, super successful organizations, spend a lot of time, like McKinsey and Consulting and Alex Partners in restructuring. I mean, these are very intelligent people looking at their craft and what they're doing, and more so than even law firms, getting them to kind of be early adopters of other things or move the needles a little bit easier. But that to me is a big indication that the world is ought to be looking at how they're going to bring this into the world, and it's affecting things in a significant way. Other ways it's being used in M&A today, and it's only going to grow, is in due diligence, right? Analyzing documents, issue spotting in due diligence, benchmarking. So comparing businesses against other businesses, pulling together benchmarking. I'm no doubt sure it's in the sort of pitch books, the book that investment bankers put together to market companies. When you've got to get information in there, you got to get competitors, you've got to get things built. There's no question they're going to be using those tools to be doing that, because that might not be sort of deep related research, but it's broad and it's very efficient to use tools like that, and then to comb through those sort of things and make comparisons, very, very valuable. Smarter redlining, which is kind of a version of creating contracts, running and issue spotting in contracts, taking a version of an agreement that if you're representing that investment bankers don't, like once you get into a deal that have an investment banker on, you usually have legal and they're separate and they have kind of their own lane. There's a little overlap, but investment bankers who really add who know what they're doing and add some value will go through a purchase agreement and make their comments. I'm sure they're using ChatGPT to issue spot, like in the same version as creating a contract itself. You can upload a contract and say, hey, I'm representing the seller. Here's what's going on. What are the top 10 things you think I should put into this agreement that relate to, financials or earnouts or whatever the investment banker's domain is that would protect the seller that aren't in here. That's a great way to use it. They're being used there. Predictive sort of modeling and forecasting. We're starting to see activity around that. So you're seeing it in there in meaningful ways, taking away not just the completely routine, mundane stuff that was not high value anyway, that maybe clients would have paid for yesterday and they're not paying for today. It's really wholesale jobs and professional tasks that are of more value kind of going away. And then, as I said earlier, the people who are just sort of mailing it in, not adding that much value in that are obvious. And there are probably none of those or very few of those at Goldman Sachs. But so those are ways it's just hitting law, investment banking, in major ways. But what is it not doing today? I said earlier, we're not at the robots are, taking over and there are no more lawyers and I'm not going to have a job tomorrow. I mean, maybe I won't have a job in 10 years. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like that's the case, and it may never be the case. I mean, what's going on and what is pretty clear will go on for a long time is AI is not in a position today, and it's hard to imagine it's going to be there tomorrow, and it's possible it will never get there. I just don't know. But it's far enough out that probably it's not something that has to be that much of a concern, I think. But again, anyway, it's not replacing lawyers today, no question. On the sort of high value add, strategic, sort of custom nuance and explanations and negotiations and brainstorming, conceptualization, and how to approach deals, right? So we're not going to see AI leading a deal. We're not going to see AI negotiating a deal with the buyer's going to have their own AI and the seller's going to have their own AI, and they're going to talk and horse trade and figure out a purchase agreement. Like, it's not coming to the center when it gets to the interactions, the human interactions, not just because it would be weird to put a computer in there and say, talk to my computer today with how things work. It's just not able to replace the complex reasoning and nuance and of a highly skilled professional and the perspective and experience that a professional acquires over time. I mean, the knowledge probably can be acquired. Now, there's the issue of it's trained off of information that's available, and there's a decent amount of information in my head. That's why you're watching these videos that isn't being said, at least not in the same way. And so there's always that coming into the market through the thought leaders. I'm not trying to self-appoint myself as one, but it's like ChatGPT doesn't have that until I say it. And then it's got to also just dilute it with everything else it's learning. It's the nature of it. So I've got perspective and understanding that ChatGPT definitely doesn't have today. And I don't think it will have next year. And kind of hard to imagine it's going to have in 10 years. But again, I don't really know. So what are clients doing? They're putting the lower level stuff is going away, right? And more clients, even ones with budget, are going to stop using lawyers some because the budget they've got, like it I don't know if you've seen, but rates are going up with lawyers. I mean, it's like clients are using like outside law firms, maybe more specific, more particularly more strategically trying to spend less money on routine tasks, all that sort of stuff. From a legal profession standpoint, it's probably the same in every other profession. I don't know if that ends up changing ultimately like how many lawyers there are, how much we all get paid. I mean, things will certainly shift like they always have. Again, technology has been making things more productive for 40, 50 years. And, companies are still spending, 1%-ish of their total revenues on legal, right? So it's like what seems to happening is there's just shifting, right? And we're going to have to bring more. The bar is going to be higher for what we can add to the deal strategically. And frankly, this is more interesting stuff for me anyway. I'd rather do videos and have high-level strategic calls than work on a document in the back office anyway. Although that's part of what I do, and it's fine. I think I add value there today. It's like, that's what's going on. And again, maybe it replaces a lot of lawyers and lowers the legal profession overall. I don't know. Or maybe it's just, everything's just sort of rises and shifts. But there's certainly going to be a lot more friction in the shorter term. And I wouldn't be surprised to seeing it just real soon sort of taking out certain types of lawyers or low levels. Or again, the business using LegalZoom probably had no budget. There's people with a lower budget trying to get, lower level legal advice, and maybe they're not going to even spend any money on that anymore. Or there's certain types of things like my client who, again, I don't think it's because they didn't think I was of adding value, but look, he doesn't need to spend money talking to me about something because they're, number one, on that issue, he would know I don't have 30 years of perspective and experience. A lot of clients come to me for stuff where they just it has nothing to do with what I do day to day. They just trust what I know about them, what I know about the world, my perspective, and how it all interacts to ask me, how do I handle this situation? And I don't mean like in their marriage, but I mean like, in a particular labor law question or something, or they know that I'm not a specialist in that and that they could get a specialist in that, but they sort of trust that my perspective is going to carry the day on that. And so this client would know I don't have that here. So maybe he doesn't, I don't have that much value in that world, where I don't know anything about I knew nothing about what he was talking about. He just thinks I'm a smart guy and maybe could spend a little time looking at it, or something. Anyway, so, it is very interesting. Just to sum this all up, a very interesting technology. I want to emphasize, increasingly common. I mean, almost daily, I get something from a client that says, along the lines of, I put this into ChatGPT. We had a deal recently with a client. We were negotiating, and the other side, it wasn't a lawyer, it was an individual. Apparently he had a lawyer friend or something in the background, but he was saying like, hey, here's what my lawyer did. He was producing turns of our document and comments about our document. And it was like the second turn that Robert Cherry works with me said, this is ChatGPT. And he pointed out why, and we knew it. So he's basically saying, look, my lawyer has said we should do this, and he's just given us ChatGPT. And it was funny and kind of ridiculous. And partly for that reason, partly other reasons, that deal didn't happen because my client didn't want to work with this guy anymore. But it was a little weird and shady and not self-aware. But he pulled it off on one turn. Here's what my lawyer says. So anyway, the point is it's increasingly a part of our world, and it's got real value, and it's making more of it as a greater ability to replace some of what I did already than any of the other things I talked about. And you have to acknowledge that it's going to get a lot better, a lot quicker. And we don't know the extent of it. So there you go. Anyway, you got any thoughts about any of this? You think I'm totally wrong about how quickly it's going to eat my lunch? Drop a comment down there. Any comments? For a while, I wasn't responding all the time to very super, super regularly comments, but we're getting back on top of that. So anything that, try not to put in your very specific, this is my situation stuff, general questions we're going to engage with. If you want to book a paid call, you can find me at clarity.fm/Brett Cenkus. I appreciate you stopping by and listening today. Thanks.